Welcome to another week of Tailrace where we're here just trying to figure it out. This week we've got Erica. What are you doing here, hey?
I thought I'd come along, make an appearance.
So for those that don't know, Erica and Jono are married.
So what are you doing here?
Well, I
This
heard
is
you
my
were
space.
lonely. You wanted someone pretty to come and look at.
You nailed it. Yeah, very true. Very true. Well, it's good to have you here.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
So we're having a conversation at the moment about love, where we're trying to discern and figure out what it means to truly love well and to be loving. And so we've gone back and looked at the words of Jesus as he spoke to crowds and crowds of people. And the next part in our story is where he starts to talk about divorce. And you're not here because we're about to get a divorce, I hope.
I didn't get the memo for that.
How about I read this little bit of scripture out? It's from Matthew 5, verse 31 onwards. And then I might throw to you, Shaz, and you can give us your first impressions. How about that? So this is what Jesus says. He said, it has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for marital unfaithfulness, causes her to become an adulteress. And anyone who marries the divorced woman commits adultery. What the heck is Jesus saying here?
Explain it to us.
So it's one of those passages where I think you've got to look at the context. So you've got to look at the historical context in which it was spoken. So when Jesus is speaking this, you had a religious group where there was division and you had two opposing sides. So one side said you could never get divorced, but then the other side said you could get divorced willy-nilly. So the wife burns the mill, so therefore you can divorce her as simply over something as simple as that.
Yeah, I've heard that you could get a divorce if she oversalted the meat too much.
Yeah.
Or even if, as a husband, if you looked at a different woman more lustfully, that was grounds for you to be able to divorce the first woman.
Yeah. So it was a system that was, I suppose, that was favouring the men of the time because the women were property in that era, and so therefore if you were divorced, then the woman not only had the shame of being divorced, she also had no income, in some instances she wouldn't have had family, she would have lost her children, so it left a woman feeling very vulnerable, and Jesus is kind of coming in and he's kind of saying, hey guys, it's just not on. The marriage actually means something more than you treating it this way and you treating women this way. It's just not on. So he's kind of saying if you have an affair, you commit adultery. He kind of goes, there's grounds there for a divorce, but, you can't just divorce willy-nilly. There's got to be a serious breakdown. And I think he's kind of saying marriage is really important and that he's trying to say you need to love one another well, and a large part of love is faithfulness and loyalty and working through at that deeper level, because everything in this passage, Jesus is constantly trying to have that inside look and going a little bit deeper rather than just living superficially or on the outside.
Sort of comes back to those previous weeks where we've spoken about how what Jesus was really talking about was, can you see the image of God in fellow humans?
Yeah.
And therefore, how does that make you do a relationship? Like, are you simply a consumer of everything that you do in your relationship where it's all about you, or are you healthy enough to be able to look beyond yourself?
Yeah. So in this passage, it's kind of like the people were willing to sacrifice a marriage over silly, trivial things. Yeah. But I think if Jesus was still here today, he would still say, you're willing to sacrifice a marriage simply to have an office, emotional relationship with somebody rather than doing the hard thing at home. You're willing to sacrifice a marriage by working umpteen hours and never seeing your partner. You're willing to sacrifice a marriage by accumulating a lot of debt because you want to have the materialistic lifestyle that creates stress. So he's kind of saying all these things that you're willing to sacrifice a relationship over. I think he would be challenging us about the validity of that. And I think also with your generation, I often hear with your generation, correct me if I'm wrong, but your generation often sort of say, I wish I could get married, but I can't because we've got to purchase the house, or we've got to purchase the business, or we've got to purchase the car, or when we have the babies, after we've had the babies, we might be able to afford the wedding and then we'll get married. And I kind of think if Jesus were here, he would kind of be going, why do you put materialism before love? Why are you constantly putting all this superficial stuff that doesn't really matter at the end of the day? Why are you putting that before love? I don't know. Is that true of your generation? Do you hear that constantly?
Oh, look, I definitely hear it a lot. And I think especially for the secular world, you know, marriage, or at least throwing a wedding is kind of more the capstone now of people's worlds. They want the career, the house, the dog, and then the wedding's kind of the capstone. But I think in Christian world, in church world, obviously we do things a little bit differently. So there's that tension there between, okay, how do we prioritize? Because you have to have financial backing to get married. I think that's really important. But again, are you compromising starting that life together at the cost of, are you choosing materialism over love? Yeah, definitely.
So you two chose love at a fairly young age, didn't you?
Yeah.
So how old were you when you met?
I was a child bride.
And thanks for coming, everybody.
That's it, we're done.
Great episode in the books.
We met when I was 17. We met quite young, but we started dating when I was 17.
I was first year uni, so what's that? I was 18, I was 19.
Fresh faced.
When we first started dating, yeah.
And what was that like? Was that fun?
I think we were talking about marriage, not our dating.
We are getting there. Was it fun?
It was stressful. I think when you're young, you're still figuring out who you are, and you're trying to get your life together, make big decisions. I think those early years, like 17 to 20, 21, 22 are probably some of the more formative years in figuring out who you are. And so throw another person into the mix with that. I think it's complex, but it was definitely a lot of fun.
Yeah, we had heaps of fun.
Yeah.
So how long have you been married for now?
Can you answer this question?
Coming up to 7 years.
7 years.
Oh, yes, 6.5.
Yeah. So what sort of things, because it's the 7 year...
the 7 year itch. I hear that's the thing.
Yeah. Well, it's because the relationship changes again. You know, they say they're about, it depends on which author you read, but some say 5 stages, some say 7 stages. And
just like your hair.
Stage. Yeah.
Just going to shut up.
So tell me, what sort of things do you guys do to put into your marriage? What sort of things are you doing to make a good marriage?
Sure.
Do you want to go first?
Sure. I suppose something that we've been doing in recent times, we've been really intentional about trying to understand each other even deeper. So, like for instance, lately we've been talking a lot about the Enneagram tool, which isn't perfect, but again, it is a really insightful tool to be able to understand one another. And so we found that spending that money to be able to do that and then spending that time, it's just been really, really valuable.
Yep. So the Enneagram's like a personality.
It's like a personality profile. Yeah. And look, whether you think it's evidence-based or not, at the end of the day, it just gives you for us, it's given us a really common language to be able to talk about how we tick.
All my broken parts.
Jono's actually really good. He's like gone away and studied for hours my profile, and I haven't quite returned the favour yet. I'm getting there.
So what sort of things have you discovered about each other that's helpful?
Yeah, I'll go.
Yeah, you go.
I'll go.
What's he going to expose?
I'll go. So it's helped me understand some of the things that like drive me nuts about Erica. And then because I've been able to understand it, like in the moments when it does irritate me, I've been able to take a step back and not be so hurt or wounded by it, but instead I've been able to bring a language and an understanding to it so that we can move past it faster. So an example would be Erica has got no idea how often irritation and frustration are just coming off her body language.
Yeah, I think I've got a poker face, but I actually don't.
But for years I was just like, oh, Erica, just fix your rubbish attitude already. Do you know what I mean?
I'm fine.
But now with like that common language around it, it's helped me be able to understand, she's probably fine, or there might be something there, but I don't need to take it so seriously. Yeah. I can point it out. I can say something like, Erica, classic, blah, 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 blah. And then she's like, oh, Oh, okay.
And there's been freedom in that, like just being like, oh, okay. And then like you can kind of move on. Like I think another example would be when we were moving into our new house. I, being a perfectionist, very much wanted all of the furniture ready to go and just everything had to be very organised and structured. I think we moved in the first night and literally just had a mattress, and Jono was stoked with that because he was in this achiever mode of like, we just got to get in as quick as we can. I'm like, no, it needs to be a slow, sacred, calm process because that's just how I had envisioned it was going to be. And I think when we could identify that we were just coming from two different camps of ways of doing it and going, oh, okay, well, I'm happy to sacrifice that control freak thing if it's going to appease Jono. I think also we'd just been living with our parents for several months. I was like, I think I better let Jono have this one.
But it also helps us to be able to celebrate the differences too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So it's given you language. So rather than everything being personalised, it can now be this almost
be a bit more
third
objective
thing out here. So you talk about an issue rather than they're just being mean to me.
Yeah, you're not just
correct.
being awful. Definitely.
Yeah. What about for you? What have you discovered about Jono?
Oh, lots. I think something that I've learned about Jono is just how much you sacrificially love me and how you always put my needs above your own. So I think back to when we decided to move interstate to Adelaide and just how much, like that was a huge step for us to decide to do that and just how much you were willing to do that. Yeah.
Which is a beautiful way of looking at what Jesus is sort of saying here, because it's kind of at the essence of what he's trying to say to the guys, I think anyway, in that culture, is if you're going to be married to this woman, then you need to love her sacrificially like I would love her, and you need to put her interests and value those interests, which is very anti-cultural to the culture he was in, and probably
and is a little bit now today too. Absolutely, I think
especially with my generation.
And I think Jono has never kind of considered his gig or his vocation as more important than mine. That's been a big one. I think he's just never like there's a quality there. Even I'll start rambling now, but
that's all right. Keep going. That's it?
That's it.
How do you cope with the achievement side of him, that success side, and also that big capacity? Because like on the Enneagram, he's in that profile where they have enormous energy and they're very success driven and they're very task driven and they're very got to accomplish and achieve this.
Yep.
And they also multitask, so they cover a wide range of territory. How do you cope with that? It's like understanding that, has that been helpful?
No, it has been helpful. I think, I think it's just been for us about putting down boundaries. So Jono is absolutely an achiever, wants to do everything, and he's very selfless in the way that he, gives of himself to the church and gives of himself to his vocation. But I think, putting down boundaries. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Yeah.
No,
putting down boundaries around where does that achievement stop and where does that rest and leisure come in? And it's one thing to sacrifice your own stuff for that achievement, but if it's coming at the sacrifice of your relationship, then where are you going to draw those boundaries?
Yeah.
Because it's not just his achievement at the expense of his own stuff. It can sometimes be at the expense of your partner.
Yeah. And it's also that temptation, isn't it, to where we can go into where Jesus is criticising the Pharisees, where even that success stuff, you can trade off a relationship for that success stuff. And it's kind of like,
it's like, what are you willing to compromise?
Day, what's all that about?
Totally.
That economic trade-off. What sort of boundaries do you guys have around your relationship?
You just blow ACLs and it's fine.
There's a story in that.
COVID too. Well, we've struggled with that, like honestly, because I like doing things. So I like playing sport. I like seeing my mates at the sport club.
You're very extroverted.
Working. I like being around people, sort of thing. And so for me, it was hard putting down those boundaries on those nights and those sorts of things. Like it's not like my role doesn't allow me to just finish work at 4 or 5 or whatever. There are some nights when I have to work. So we were struggling with that a little bit, but we'd started to do things like I'll try beat you home before I then head back out, sort of thing, as opposed to just being out from 8 in the morning till late at night. some of those sorts of things. But I wouldn't say I was doing a very good job. So then
I think we've got more.
Myself.
Yeah. Are you going to share that or is that a story for another day?
Everyone knows. I just hurt myself because I'm old.
Jono can't play competitive soccer anymore, so I have him home more. No, but I think just being more intentional about, just like you would map out your appointments for the week, we're mapping out, okay, well, these are the times that we have together, and can be really intentional about how we spend that time together, rather than it being a last thought or I think that's something that Jono and I have really been chatting about a lot lately, is that, I'm not just an accessory to his gig. I'm not just an add-on and a last thought. I think, with your work and how busy it can get sometimes, there's the capacity there or the temptation to enter into that, as you said, superficial marriage where we're just two people that just live parallel lives and we just go home and we sleep side by side, and that's the extent of our relationship. And I don't think either of us want that kind of marriage. Yeah. So I think you have to be intentional about going against that temptation.
Yeah. What would you say to a younger version of yourselves, two young people starting to date? What advice would you give to them?
I suppose it depends on the couple and their personalities.
You can't give that answer. Come on, give a real answer.
I would say for myself, because I'm a bit of a sassy pants sometimes and I can be a little bit stubborn, but I would probably, rather than hide that, I would actually encourage that and say, no, you need to speak your mind, and if people don't take you seriously, then speak a little louder, because I think boundaries are really important. And I think if you've got something there that you're working through, you usually it's not nothing, there's something there, and to just keep communicating openly. And I think too, to be really open with expectations and talking about the kind of life that you envision, because maybe that's not a realistic aspiration, or maybe it is. And, I think it's just about figuring out together as two people the kind of life that you want to live. You've got two people and you've come from completely different families sometimes, and you're both having to leave and cleave that culture and that family and make up your own new way of doing things. And I think there's tension in that. There's pain and there's compromise, and it's like, who compromises? Do we both compromise? Because sometimes there can be that kind of playing each other off of, playing tit for tat. Yeah. I would say to a younger couple, like you're the couple. Don't allow other people, like you want older people to speak into your life, but to be true to the kind of life that you want to lead as a couple.
So some of that requires listening internally, doesn't it, to
Absolutely.
yourself, whereas some people, they struggle to be authentic in that space, don't they? And they listen to so many other voices. It's sort of like peer pressure, isn't it? Or what's the latest trend kind of thing in thought, rather than being able to hear on the inside, okay, what is it that I'm really wanting? And then articulating that.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not even explicit pressure or explicit voices. It's just, sometimes it's your own complex that you're just trying to work through. I remember when we first got married, obviously Jono working in church, you weren't when we first got married, but it was pretty obvious you were going to go into that area of work in whatever years to come. But I think a big complex for me to work through was I just felt that pull of like the pastor's wife phrase, and very much a complex for me to work through.
It's a horrible phrase.
Oh, it's awful. I hate it.
Yeah. We should just agree to ban it.
We should. It's kind of this condescending shrug of, she just supports him in his gig, and she's sweet and nice, and she's just the supporting role. And I think, when we cast women in that role in the church, it's very damaging, and it's sexism at its finest. But I've never had that pressure from Jono. It's only ever been
I've been very much the opposite of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that's a way that Jono honours me really well. And I think that us moving to Adelaide and you sacrificially coming with me to do that is such a beautiful demonstration of that, because it's never been about your gig over mine. It's about being a team and carving out our lives together, as opposed to doing what other people want us to do necessarily.
Yeah. Jono, what would you say to somebody?
I'd probably say be committed to growing.
Yeah.
Like don't be lazy. Like be committed to growing personally, but also as a couple, as a relationship. Like none of us are the finished article in terms of how we love and how we do life. And so if you're committed to growing personally, you've got more tools on the tool belt, I suppose, to be able to do that relationship. But also if you're growing as a couple, like you're growing together as opposed to growing apart. The other thing I'd probably say is learn to balance how to love sacrificially, like what you're talking about. So I want Erica to win. Like I want her to do really well. I want her to chase her dreams. But at the same time, I'm still allowed to voice what I would like as well.
Yeah.
And so trusting Erica that even though I'm going to choose to love you and help you do what you want to do, I'm still going to say what would fulfill me as well. And then just believing that sometime in the future or some way through that, there'll be you'll be reciprocal in that, I suppose. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So those are probably the two things I'd say.
Yeah.
Growing and loving sacrificially, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you've been married for a lot longer than us, Shaz, and you've also counselled lots of couples and married lots of couples. So, I mean, what do you think is the recipe for a healthy marriage?
Still figuring it out. I know, I mean that quite seriously, because I don't know that you ever arrive. I think it's something that you constantly are having to work at, like any relationship. And I think that it's a bit like, how I think it's geese or swans or, birds, when they fly in the V and one's at the front and then it goes to the back and then the next one comes forward. And I think it's this constant thing in a marriage where you're constantly one person probably has a more dominant voice and then the other one comes up. So you're constantly switching. It's kind of like, when you have your babies, for us anyway, it was Tim's career that was taking off. When Tim was sick, it's kind of like that was my space to lead then because he couldn't do it in that space. But then when he's well, it's kind of, you're constantly doing this. And I mean, that's how it looked like for us. Yeah. For other people, it would look differently. But I think there's this constant ebbing and flowing between each other. And sometimes the transitions between that can be awkward and difficult and hard, and that's where the hard work has to go into it. But I'm not convinced that both parties can always lead and dominate at the same time. I'm not convinced that that's possible, and I think that's where some of the tension comes from, rather than this ebbing and flowing between sacrificial love, putting the other one first, pulling back, putting the other one. Do you know what I mean? But I think over a lifespan, you got to look at it. Where's the equality in the lifespan? Yeah. Because I don't think you can have everything all in the same season. So, and I don't think it's healthy to want everything all at once. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does.
It might sound a bit sexist.
No, absolutely.
Because I think to that point, there's a lot of joy that can be found when you are supporting the other person.
Absolutely.
In pursuit of what they want. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? When they're taking the lead, like, again, coming back to Adelaide, I was just doing random jobs or whatever, and but there was a lot of enjoyment. There was a lot of pleasure that came from seeing Erica thriving in that university and from seeing her thrive in her workplace. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was really enjoyable.
Yeah. And I'm sure there will be seasons to come where I'm more, engaged in Jono's vocation and supporting that as well. It just hasn't been the season at the moment.
Yeah. And I kind of look at it like when our children were younger, I mean, it was a different era. I got more out of that than Tim did, because Tim was, interstate, he was working a lot, and it was just the era too. But then when he had his stroke, Rachel was in high school, the boys were
a
little bit older, but because he was more at home, so he did the kid pickup from school a lot more than what I did. He was home of a weekend. And I kind of look at that and I kind of go, Rachel got to spend hours with Tim of a weekend talking, whereas if he hadn't have been sick, and if I had have been at home, he wouldn't have had that opportunity. And I can either look on that season and kind of go, I missed out on being maybe the mum that I wanted to a teenager in that space and time, or I can look at it and kind of go, well, okay, I had to work longer hours, but Tim actually got the chance in that season to be a dad that maybe he didn't anticipate that he was going to be. So it's kind of this ebbing and flowing constantly, and not trying to have those regimented boxes all the time of this is what has to happen here and this has to be and this person has to do this and this person has to be this to me. It's this constant conversation of, well, how's it working, and managing those transitions between the different
really
things that you have to do.
That's awesome.
I don't know.
No, I can relate to that, because I think sometimes I'm quite an idealistic person, so I get hung up on the ideal of what it's supposed to be, as opposed to just relaxing in that and just resting in the rhythm that you're in and the season that you're in.
And I love this passage that Jesus here, because he is really emphasising the importance of marriage and relationship, because he's a relational God. And so he's just saying, just don't sell out. Don't sell your relationship out for petty things, Don't sell it out for that materialistic pursuit or that success pursuit or that
lust or whatever.
Don't sell out on it, because the richness that comes over the period of time, or just the security that comes, is really valuable and really important. And that's where you'll actually find a lot of joy.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Love that.
Cool. Well, I think that was an awesome conversation. We might leave it there. Erica, do you think you could pray for us and all the viewers at home?
Yeah, absolutely. Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you for all the viewers with us today. I thank you that we can have these conversations about marriage and about Jesus and the feminist that he was. And Lord, I just pray that, we would just continue to pursue your order of doing things, God, that would continue to choose love over all of the pullings of this world, God, that we would choose joy and peace and mercy, God. Heavenly Father, I just pray for all those watching today. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.